From the Dallas On Air studios in beautiful Dallas, Texas, this is Fulfillment right here on DallasOnAir.com. And now here's your host, the Mega Bomber, PJ Dunn.
All right, welcome everybody to the Fulfillment Show. This is season 4, and this is episode 17. So we are together today. I'm here with my trusty sidekick and co-host, and well, the guy in front of the camera, back of the camera, side of the camera, and working on the computers and everything else that goes along with the camera that it's attached to. It's Kazak.
Greetings and salutations, campers. Welcome to DallasOnAir.com.
Yes, sir. So it's Labor Day weekend, and we're filming the show. Some of you might be out partying, but that's okay. This will show up on the Vega Bomber channel on YouTube tomorrow. So while you're off tomorrow, you'll get a chance to check out what we talked about now.
If you're not catching it live, which of course you can always stream us on Facebook Live and of course DallasOnAir.com.
Thank you very much. That is also true, and we welcome it either which way you take in our particular content. So what are we talking about today? Well, this is basically that conversation you've had with your friends either once or at least a million times, because the topic just won't go away, and that is, what makes a movie great? Now, I'll start with just saying a little bit about our little intro into this, and then we're going to just dive right into the content itself. And so my statement is this: art is subjective, so it is hard to get everyone to agree with what is a great movie. At the same time, when you watch a film that sticks with you, it creates a feeling in you. After viewing it, you probably have watched something great. Now, just loving a movie doesn't make it a great film. However, great films are often beloved. There are some components to a film that, if done well, can lead to a spectacular cinematic experience. And Kazak, isn't that what we want when we go to the theater?
Of course. Of course. I mean, we're gonna want that to varying degrees, but we're always going to want that rewarding film. We're gonna want to get to the most, not only out of our ticket money, but out of our time. Because when we're going into these movies, we're more often than not giving our attention to something, and we want that thing to be worth the time that we spent.
Absolutely.
The investment.
Absolutely, because that's one thing you can't do, folks, and you all know this, is you can't get your time back. We all have the same 1,440 minutes a day, so no one gets more or less. It's just, what do you do with that time? And now with streaming services, you know, the idea that you can stay home and watch some of these movies has kind of affected the cinematic experience. But today, hopefully, we can make some cases for why the cinema is still worth going to on that big screen, seeing that 35 millimeter, shot film on something larger even. So we can talk about that. But first of all, if we were just answering the question just straight up, generally, before we dive into more of the specifics, Kazak, what would you say for you in a straight line, I guess? You know, what makes a film great?
For me, that's not a straight line question. It never is. It's never a straight line question for me, because there are different moods and different modes and things like that, that when I'm going into a film, I want to get something out of it. It may be, the fact that it's a conversation, or because it may be just dialogue, or it may be, a sweeping action sequence, or it may be, for me, it's going to be something horror. It's either got to be kind of greater than or different than. It's got to be something that I want to experience. Mm-hmm. Whether that's empathy or revulsion or things like that. But there is no straight line answer to that question, because different films have different levels of greatness. And, I can't say that it's a straight line question for me, because it really kind of depends on what I'm going for at the time.
Yeah, I just meant like in general, if you were to give me a synopsis, so maybe that kind of threw that off a little bit. But you're right, there are so many components to this. So to me, the key ingredients of movie being great is it's when the acting and the directing, the writing, the cinematography, and the overall production value all come together to tell a cohesive story, and one that is impactful, one that we remember, and one that in ways we relate to. And when I see all of that happening all at once, to get all those things, to me, it's a great movie. Like, you've seen the movies where the soundtrack was great, but the movie sucked. Sure. Or the movie sucked, but the sound design was horrible. Right. Or the acting was great, but the plot was kind of stupid. I mean, this is kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's different levels of great. Like, there's great on an epic scale. Like you take something like Gone with the Wind or The Godfather, things like that. Those are great in an epic scale. Then you get smaller, intimate films, something like, I don't know, The Crying Game or The Breakfast Club, things like that. They're great films in and of themselves, but completely separate. And it may not necessarily be a cohesive line or things like that, because it may be great for just different elements for it. Like Evil Dead 2 is a great horror film.
Yeah.
But there's nothing cohesive in that story. There's nothing cohesive in the story. But it's great in and of itself because it's an epically made horror film.
Yeah.
So I think it's when it comes together for you that makes it a great film, because Citizen Kane is a great film. It's not a great film for me, but
Right.
it is a great film.
Yes.
So-
Yes. Yeah. And you know what? That's a great distinction, because, and maybe we will just dive into some of that. So when you think about Citizen Kane, what you're talking about is a movie that is crafted well, shot well. Now today, would the dialogue stand up today in the sense of how we talk today, with the clothing, with the things that they were worried about in that movie, would they stand up today? Probably not as much. But in terms of how films were shot back in the early years, film in the 30s at this case, and even before that with silent film in the 20s, the idea that they were willing to go to different lengths to shoot more than just a shoulder-over-shoulder shot when two people were talking. Like the idea that they could show depth in what was going on behind the two characters, so that you didn't have to focus on just this person's face, that person's face. Now this person retorts, and here's their face.
Right.
Like, yeah, it was one of the first of its kind to do some of that, and it innovated. So I guess one mark of a great film would be the innovation in the film. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we're gonna start going for examples, Seven Samurai. Seven Samurai is a great film.
Oh, boy.
It's an epically great film because of the way it's shot, because of the story, because of the cast, things like that. Everything about that film is really great. Universally, I think you can say it's a great film. Just, it may not be everyone's cup of tea, and it may not hold up to kids' attention span today, but for all intents and purposes, it is a great film.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just the way you see, the great action sequences or the great intimate conversations, the way it's shot, just everything about Kurosawa's film is innovative, it's inventive, it's creative, and it's great not only for the time, but also the fact that it's a timeless story of, the poor rising up against their oppressors. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look at how many films
universal theme,
that film then inspired for other people to take most of it to do their own deal. Lucas, I'm looking at you.
Correct.
So
we'll get into that. I know we're going to get into that.
yes, we will. So this is good. So if we're talking about the components then of great films, we know that there's going to be a piece of time where we're looking at or talking about the acting, of course. There is the direction. There is the writing. And then there is the cinematography, where it actually does get caught by the director of principal photography. There is the production values that they put into it, and then of course we're looking at that story, that plot, the characterizations. And so, if we just start off with, say, one of the components, let's say we start off with the script itself.
Okay.
Right. So, the script, without a good script, you've just got pictures moving and people walking around doing weird things. So the script, to me, I think when I think of a great script for a movie, it's not that the script is trying to tell the director where to point the cameras and cut to this and scene to that, because that's what the writer is seeing, unless the writer, of course, is the director. Because the director is supposed to do something completely different. But with the writer, it's the questions. It should be, well, who is the protagonist? Why is he the protagonist? What's he trying to do? What is he or she trying to do? What gets in his or her way? So how do they eventually solve it? What does the end result become? And is this something that makes sense with what we understand about the narrative or the character himself? It's so a good script, and I'll give you a perfect example of a good script. I can very easily go to Hell or High Water.
Okay.
Right, very easy.
I know what to go to for you, so.
Yep, it's a very easy one to come. And I could use Star Wars, I could use Alien, I could use so many films. But when I think of a great script, that script also has dialogue in it. and the dialogue in Hell or High Water, all of it makes sense. No one's just saying something rare, or they're trying to signal something with the dialogue that the script can just show visually anyway, or that the visuals could show later anyway. It's not written in that kind of way. It's written in a way where it's a nouveau Western. So it's following some of the tropes of what you would think is a good Western, but what would that look like today? What would that language look like today? Since there won't be a shootout at the OK Corral at the end of the film. And so Hell or High Water just says, hey, here's something innovative here that we can do. And we can have more dialogue, say the pieces, than the actual violence itself, although it does have a lot of action sequences. What about you, Kazak, when you start thinking about it like a great script?
When I'm going to go to a great script, I'm trying to think of original screenplay versus versus something from the source material.
Okay.
If I'm going to go adapted material, I got to go with Silence of the Lambs. Just the way that film is crafted, the dialogue, the dialogue, the playfulness, the intrigue, everything just kind of unveiling and unwrapping as the whole puzzle unfolds before you. Not to mention the fact that it's perfectly. You have those actors delivering those lines. That's such a well-structured story. Yeah. If you're going to go for an original script, and again, because it's the director's vision, I got to go with Pulp Fiction. You really see that kind of fully carried out vision. You see it playing with time. You see it playing with elements, the pieces, and again, those actors delivering that vision of Quentin Tarantino's dialogue. It's different pieces and stories and things like that all tie together and interweave and intertwine and just kind of come in and out and gives you really just great and quotable dialogue.
Oh my gosh, yes. Almost every one of Tarantino's scenes when you have people, it's always a random group of people sitting at a table. Mm-hmm. And they have the kind of conversations like we're having right now about what makes a great film. They're doing it in the movie.
Yes.
And so he finds this way to make just every ordinary day things that we do ourselves. And he puts those characters in a situation where they could talk about it. And then it feels like the characters are so lived in, even though we've done nothing like them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing that I think makes for a great script is that you get true empathy for the situation or the characters, or you develop you're basically dropped into this story, and you're surrounded by it, and it really draws you in.
Yes, I love it because, as you know, as also a favorite film fan and film enthusiast, that there's many ways to say open a movie, and the script is the big part of that. Like, how are you going to begin to tell this story? And some people say, well, you got to give a complete origin story in the beginning, and then others say, no, just drop them in, and then 20 minutes after the first 20 minutes of action, then you go back and tell the story. We know Spielberg does that a lot, and so did Lucas with A New Hope, right?
Yeah.
So there's different ways with a good script, how to open up a movie. And so which one are you more in favor of? Or do you like just when they give you the whole complete origin story and spoon feed you, or do you like when you just see some sequence of action first and then you start to unravel who this character is? Or is there another version that you like?
No, I mean it truly just kind of depends on the film itself. It really just kind of depends on, because again, if you're getting dropped into just this moment, like Reservoir Dogs will drop you right into the day of the heist, the middle of the heist, and then takes you back to when it was being planned and takes you to the aftermath and things like that. You're kind of dropped in, but also you have those pieces that really develop and things like that. And again, Pulp Fiction, because again, you're getting all these different pieces of the story unfolding and weaving before you, because you have the beginning in the coffee shop being robbed, and then it takes you back to the end and picks you right back up where you were. Mm-hmm. So it's origin, things like that, which help you develop a sympathy for the character, and then there's also just, hey, we're going to drop you into this really heavy moment of these people's lives.
Yeah. It's such an art form. It's so great when you see people just take different things. I mean, because that's what they did, right, with Indiana Jones, right? You don't realize he's a professor at first, They drop you right into a sequence where he's trying to get the particular artifact that we all know
Right.
about, and then it goes back and shows him in class teaching, and you go, "Oh, he's a professor," which you didn't realize maybe at first. You just saw, "Hey, here's this great action film," but it had this way of pulling back after giving you a great action sequence to go, "Oh yeah, this is what this guy does
Yeah,
for a living."
Yeah, and you take Star Wars Star Wars Episode 4.
Yes.
You're getting the origin of these two droids carrying plans, and these plans make their way onto the planet, and then the boy takes the boy on the hero's journey and things like that. You see the origin of Luke wanting to get off the planet. You see the mysterious old man. Having basically history and unfolding this kid's destiny. It's a real art form to see.
Oh, yes, it's so good because when you think about that, speaking of openings and the writing of this opening, and we certainly will talk about the actors and all that as well, but I remember as a kid, I don't know if you remember this, the first time, remember when you're watching and you see this massive ship, it's telling you everything you need to know. Who's in power? Look at the massive ship, the Imperials. Who's not? Look at the rebels and look how small their ship is. And then the way it's just engulfed by the big ship, like the ship engulfs the whole screen. You see the sense of size and scope. And then that moment where you hear them lock on and you see the rebels just sitting there by their sides waiting. What's going to come through that door?
Yep.
What's that whole thing? And I remember just the first few moments, I was locked in like, okay, what's happening? What's going to come on the other side of that door? And then you see what is ranked one of the top 3 villains of all time. Mm-hmm. And it starts with how Darth Vader makes an entrance into this film. And you're feeling for the rebels already, and you hadn't even seen Darth Vader yet. Because the look of terror that they have on their faces, they're waiting for whatever's going to come through that door. I mean, yes. Okay, so we can talk about this. Yeah. So let's look at another aspect, another component. So we started with the writing. So what about the direction? So when we're looking at directors, sometimes they're not the writers of the screenplay, and yet they have to convey a vision based off of the screenplay, but also what's in their head. So when you think of some of the great directing, what directors pop in your mind, KZ?
Well, Scorsese.
Yeah.
We'll start.
Let's just break the spades now.
Yeah, we'll start with Scorsese because, again, he knows how to get those really intimate moments, and he really knows how to get impact on screen. He really has just the understanding of how to unfold a story in front of you, no matter how brutal it is. Mm-hmm. That you go with the man who can basically just kind of open you up and just take you on the journey like the adapted story of Goodfellas.
Yes.
Henry Hill's Tale.
Yes.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster, and you see this kid going through his growth in and around this culture, and being embroiled in it, and being sucked in, and just basically achieving his dream. No matter how terrible that dream was. I just from the opening moments of that to just everything that unfolds, it really draws you in as far as being in this guy's shoes.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic way to tell a story.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think of the scene in 42, and of course the director's name is going to slip my mind at the moment, but there's a scene in 42 where Chadwick Boseman playing Jackie Robinson is getting just haggled from the field, and they're saying all this racist stuff when he's up at bat, and he just can't take it, and he just goes and he runs into the dugout and goes into like the dark hallway that leads to the dugout, right? Yeah. And then you have Branch Rickey, played by Harrison Ford, and doesn't look like Harrison Ford. They did a great job with the prosthetics. But the visual of, here are these two men standing at the end of this row, and it's dark. And at that moment, Branch Rickey looks black too, just like Jackie Robinson. And so for them to pull back to show the long scene, looking all the way down, here's Jackie Robinson getting beat up for being this black character, this black player that they did not want in their leagues. Here's Branch Rickey, a white man, coming down to meet him, and he tells him, no, I don't know what it's like to be you. I don't know what that's like. And then he tells him, but if you quit now, then all those people will be right about you. They'll say all these things. And then the camera backs up. The idea that the director here says, no, I want to capture this well. I want to pull this so far back that they're both darkened by the black. So in this case, it's like they're both black in this situation. Like his compassion was shown from just because the director had this visual of saying, we need to do it this way. We need to shoot it this way rather than just having a back and forth over the shoulder conversation. So the vision, to me, I love the directors that say, yeah, we can shoot it like this.
Yeah, the director is Brian Helgeland.
Yes. Oh, thank you very much for that. Yeah. And so the idea that he pulled back, and whether it was his idea or the director of photography to do it, I think it's more of his vision, because you could have just kept it where it was. Two men talking in the bellows of this baseball stadium. But he doesn't. He pulls back to where they're just covered in darkness because they're at the very front where the light is coming in. And in a way, they're sharing the same, even though they're sharing the same moment, it's like they're sharing the same skin color by showing them both as black in that situation.
Right.
And so then what he does is he leans in and he gives him a hug. And I was like, that is the most powerful scene to say, I get you even though I'm not you. The way it was shown visually. So yeah, oh man, I can you go.
Right.
And then even more so, right after that, they knew exactly when to go into humor, because what happens is Jackie destroys the baseball bat up against the brick wall in there because he's so angry he has to take it out on something. And then after he, Branch Rickey comes in and says that, and then gives him that hug, he says, I think I'm going to need a new bat. And that was perfect.
Yeah.
It wasn't quipping the whole time, dissolving the tension of what had just happened. It wasn't that at all. It was well placed after you had this very intense moment with Jackie Robinson and Branch Rickey. And if y'all haven't seen the film 42, then you got to go see it. What are you doing? Yeah. If I could say that. So let's look at another aspect. Let's look at, since we're talking about it, let's talk about acting.
Okay.
So great acting can also be is a great component of a great film. What stands out to you? What's a moment or scene that comes to you in terms of acting, or maybe just an actor himself? Or so.
Let's see. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of one of those that kind of pops off screen. I guess. Oh, I think I'll go with True Romance.
Okay.
The dialogue between Dennis Hopper and Christopher Walken. Dennis Hopper tied to the chair. He's in a hopeless, no-win situation. Christopher Walken looming over him in this as a crime lord, things like that. He needs to know where Dennis Hopper's kid is, Christian Slater. And Dennis Hopper knows he's done for, and he's just joking and laughing with this really evil character right at the time. And there's a no-win for this. But I mean, these two really dynamic actors are going back and forth, having a conversation. There's even like a racist joke in there and things like that. And eventually it kind of dissolves into, yeah, you're going to die. But he delivers it, with a smile on his face, and then just goes completely serious and kills him.
Yeah.
It's moments in those actors that just really draw you in, and you hear it. It's not a screaming scene. It's just basically a very calm conversation between two guys, one who is absolutely resigned to his fate and still trying to protect his kid, the other one who knows, I need this from you, and I'm going to get this. It's a really just dark and dynamic performance from two kind of guys who are just almost improvising the scene, basically.
Oh my gosh.
And Tony Scott as the director, just kind of giving them that leeway.
Yeah.
It's a really just kind of powerful scene. And again, when you talk acting, you're talking stuff that it may not necessarily just be in the dialogue. It may just be in in the eyes, in the face, things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll talk a recent film. We'll talk Black Phone.
Yes.
Hawke, you don't see his face for most of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing only portions of his face, so he's really having to express with his eyes, or he's really having to express dialogue that you necessarily have to kind of pay attention to. You're getting a great performance out of an actor who's really trying to make the most of the scene.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So yeah.
Oh, it's so good. It's so
Yeah.
good. And you're right with that, because there's so many, because in certain scenes, I would say that the great acting is the actor actually knowing what not to say. I think it's a less is more thing, right? Mm-hmm. So like when you hear people trying to explain all their stuff, you're going, that's not great acting. And it puts the actor in a very bad spot when they have to do that. And that's why when I think of Denzel Washington, right? So in The Equalizer, there's a scene where he meets the antagonist face to face, and he walks in there with the glasses of the guys he beat up. There was a guy that had on these shades, and he had them smashed up and they were broken, and he walked in with it in his hands. So he basically walked into the antagonist's lair, whooped all of his guys to get to him. And you think, okay, this is going to be intense. And it is, because the conversation that he's having with the antagonist, they're both trying to mentally screw the other one. But so if you say it the wrong way, it comes off like, well, my dad's bigger than your dad. But it wasn't, because Denzel Washington could sit there after the man would make his statement about, this is how I'll ruin you. Yeah, you may have killed my men walking in here. Let's see you do that when blah, 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 when the rest of us go out, right? He's doing all this stuff. And Denzel Washington could easily just say, well, my dad's bigger than your dad. And he doesn't. He just sits there and he pauses for a second. And he holds up those glasses. He looks at those glasses that he smashed that was on one of his toughest bodyguards. And he just looks at it. And he goes, I guess that'll be a moment then that both of us can enjoy. And it was just like, whoa. I mean, he could have said so many different things or did so many different things, but the pause, the wait, he just kind of turned and looked at the glasses. And then he decided to go ahead and return back to the conversation. I mean, it's just moments like that, just pauses. Like, Denzel Washington can pull that off as either the good guy, the bad guy, the hard ass, right? And even sometimes he can do comedy, but that was just a moment in that movie. And the Book of Eli has a ton of them, by the way, because he's playing a man that I can't say whatever, but you'll see it.
And another one is range of the actor, and I'll give a perfect example.
Give me
of this.
that.
I'll give you the perfect example of this, and it's not one you'd expect. Carrie Fisher in The Blues Brothers. She doesn't speak throughout the whole film until she finally has a confrontation with Jake and Elwood. And she has this conversation, this one line of just monologue, where she's basically this jilted fiance with her ex-fiance at gunpoint, and she's delivering everything. She breaks down how she was. You'd look just fine there slithering in the mud, because she knows she's got them cold, and she delivers at the anger of her family being used. And then John Belushi, Jake, just looks at her brother and says, no problem, I got this. Oh, please don't kill us, please don't kill us. And just goes on this ridiculous rant of, no, it wasn't my fault. And she's got him dead to rights. And then you see, and she's gone from supreme victory to righteous anger to softening to weakening.
Yeah.
Takes the kiss, and then he lets her go in the mud. Boom! Falls onto her back, and she realizes she's been screwed again. And she's jilted, and she gets up and she goes after them with the machine gun. And of course, these guys are on a mission from God, and they're saved.
Oh,
through
man.
the skin of their teeth. It's just, but it's just in about 5 minutes of, not even 5 minutes, 3 minutes. Carrie Fisher goes from every possible emotion on screen to deliver a really good piece of comedy.
Wow.
And it's just amazing.
Yeah.
To see.
And I think about that as you were saying that, and I think about when I was watching Batman Begins, Christopher Nolan now doing his first Batman movie, and something that struck me that hadn't struck me in any other Batman movie before was when Batman gets gassed by the Scarecrow. So when you watch that scene, like Batman in these movies, he's big, he's dark, he's black, he can hide in shadows, he's got all these crazy equipment and gift, and then if he gets into hand-to-hand combat with you, he's gonna whoop your ass. It's just who Batman is, right? And you're just praying that he doesn't ever flip the coin and become Joker and then do the other things, right? But there's a scene in Batman Begins. Christian Bale nails it, even with the mask on and all that kind of stuff. And it's when he gets gassed by the first time from Scarecrow. So he's not aware of all of Scarecrow's weapons yet, because he's new at being Batman. So he doesn't know, right?
Sure.
And so you see this scene where he gets gassed, and he knows, I got to get out of here, because if I'm found, then people will take the mask off. They'll see who I am, and I'm just getting started. That'll ruin my whole Batman thing. So he shoots his grappling hook, gets on top of the building, and makes it enough to get on top of the Batmobile, right? And that voice, when he tries to call Alfred to let him know he's in trouble, the way he says Alfred, and the way he's scared, but at the same time running out of time because we don't know how long before this potion kills him. And he knew enough to get on the Batmobile, and then we learned that car can be it's controlled, so it can turn around, it can start heading back to the Batcave, so that he can get the help that he needs from Alfred. But you'd never seen Batman be so fragile before in a movie, right? Because usually he's always just tough. He comes in, he's smart, he's debonair, he's Bruce Wayne, he's all these things. But that one scene, Christian Bale, right there, when I saw that, I said, I can get into this character. I can buy this because Batman's not invincible. He's the human being that he is out of all the other superheroes who have superpowers. He does not. And he did not forget that.
Yeah.
Oh, that scene's crazy. And another one. Let's talk about another component would be the production value. So what makes it into the scene, how they get the equipment and the stuff, and how they're trying to tell it. So what comes to your mind when you think about the production value in a film?
Let's go.
And there's so many.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the best example. The best example I can come up with is probably the last scene in The Usual Suspects.
Yeah.
Because you have this well played out crime story. He's fine. Verbal Kent is finally caught, and you see all of these components start to come in from this 2-hour story that he's been telling, and you see it all come together in one climactic scene, and you get the big reveal and things like that. You get all these just elements in one scene that you didn't notice, and then it all pops up and hits you like a lightning bolt, and you're seeing it through the eyes of this cop who finally understands he's been taken in by this very simple, weak criminal.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen it, you understand why that's a big deal, because once that reveal comes, and don't mistake my kindness for weakness. Just it really kind of unfolds. Just when you have all those really simple elements, and of course you get the mug shattering and things like that in that scene, and you see why it's important, and you watch it all unfold. Again, that's some really masterful storytelling by Bryan Singer. Yeah. We can say all we want about Bryan Singer, separate the art from the man, but still, that's a masterful scene. And all of it hits you, and when you've been on this ride for 2 hours watching these criminals pull off this heist, not so successfully, and then things just go wrong with the boat, and you get this great film noir tale, and finally it all unfolds and it just hits you all at once.
Yeah, I think that was the first movie I went to that I saw where people at the end of it stood up and applauded. Like I don't usually see it very happen, and sometimes people just applaud sitting, but people stood up and gave that movie a standing O. It was the first movie I went to where I saw that. I love the production value. I'll go with a simple, easy one. I'll go with just Star Wars. Just the idea that when you look at this world that's supposed to look old because it happened a long, long time ago, and just the attention to the details on all the ships, the planes, the gear, what people were wearing. I mean, that production value with very limited budget and without CGI. I mean, that was wonderful to me how Lucas was able to create that world, and he knew what belonged in there. Like their version of what would be a clock, their version of what would be, you just think of normal things and it's in there and it makes it feel real. When you see where Luke is living with his aunt and uncle, and you see just the equipment that's in the kitchen, it all makes sense. Yet, even though it was something that happened in the galaxy, long time ago, but still kind of futuristic in a way. And just seeing how he set up all these different scenes by the time he gets to Empire Strikes Back, where he's created this swampland in Dagobah where, Yoda lives. And here are all these things that could potentially kill you. It's a swamp. It's a horrible place. And that's where he trains, right? So there's just so much to just the stuff that made it in to the production itself that gives the whole shot or that scene necessary heft to make you say, I believe that. I can get along with that. I can go there.
Yeah.
And then I would say another element that we could talk about before we dive into some of these specifically, cinematography. The lining up of shots. And so to me, if I use just a recent one I love to hear yours as well, Zach, is I have to go with Nope. That cinematography was ridiculous. In The Northman I saw this year, the cinematography, ridiculous. What was trapped, the lighting, where the lighting was set, how it lit the certain things that it was trying to light and then not let you focus. Like I think of Willem Dafoe's face in Northman. He almost looks like a demon, even though he's a jester. The way it's lit, the hues, the colors, everything that they used, and then just the angle of just staying put and then panning a little bit, but then staying put and then panning a little bit, and you're just getting a little closer. I don't know. It's just cinematography is something I can talk about for hours. But what are some things that pop in your mind when we talk about that?
There's a lot. No, I mean because there's so many directions that you can go. I'll take Godfather.
Okay.
Where you get the first shot of Brando sitting in the office petting the cat. He's framed by the window. Just a very simple, you understand that this man is the focus of the scene. You understand that this man is the focus of power, and everyone around him respecting him. Then you get a call back to that shot in Godfather Part 2 where Michael, tells Kay, don't ask about my business. And then Kay pushes open the door, and she sees Michael again framed by that same office, framed in that same window, being shown respect by his peers. So it really kind of calls into just basically the elements of a scene. Just calling in very simply, and just things that you remember long ago, just always calling back and rushing back into you. Meanwhile, you've got cinematographers who really envelop color and mood and tone, like Spike Lee and Do the Right Thing.
Yes.
Because there's so many bright colors and things like that amongst a dingy urban setting. And I mean, you can tell this is summer because there's bright lighting and things like that. And then you go to nighttime and you see the pizza place being burned down, and you see the fire lighting Ruby Dee's face as she's screaming, raging against what's happening. It just calls into your mind just so many elements, how you can actually feel that moment, how you can feel what's going on and everything around you, even though you're not there. You're just watching images on the screen. It's what draws you in and makes you feel. You take into account The Thing, just that cold Antarctic base, and then you get the flamethrower fights and things like that. And you just understand just how many of these elements can play into what you're doing, because that in and of itself, the cinematography builds your empathy.
Yes.
It builds and puts you into that moment and makes you feel what those characters are feeling. That's what good filmmaking is, what good cinematography is, when it can draw your eye, but more importantly, when it can draw that visceral reaction from you.
Yes. Oh, I love it. And see, that's why Hell or High Water is is probably my number one film of all times in some ways, in terms of movies that have been created in the last 15 years or so. Because when you see Hell or High Water, it's shot wide so that you see the land. The land is what's causing all these problems, because there's people trying to own it. And so you see this wonderful juxtaposition of, see how broad and big this land is, but look at these small people trying to control it. These few people that are trying to own all of this, which then creates problem for the people who are just trying to get by on the land. So in those big sweeping shots, where it's supposed to be Texas, but it was shot in New Mexico, right? It's supposed to be West Texas. You see how, wow, look at that expanse. Look how much everyone could have. But no, it's controlled by a few people. And those few people are helped creating the drama between these two brothers and the Texas Rangers. And in a way, you sit back and you go, well, you know what? I don't blame them for what they're doing when you consider what the antagonist is doing here. And at the same time, you look at the Texas Rangers and they're going, but I don't blame them because they have to do what they're doing because they're basically the special, police, if you will. And they're the only ones that have the jurisdiction to go across as broad as they need to, everything to try to go and see if they can remedy this situation. And so I love it because but every time they get a chance to shoot something other than the dialogue piece, you see the land, and the land is this harbinger that keeps saying, this is the thing. We're supposed to have space to do whatever we want, but yet it's being controlled by just the small group. All this land controlled by the small group.
Yeah.
And that group is just vindictive and manipulative and destroying towns.
Yeah.
Are being destroyed.
And the setting in and of itself becoming a character. The set in and of itself becoming a character. That's good cinematography. When it can actually be a character and an element in itself.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the placement, and we there's so much of those. The story is so impactful there. So let's kind of dive into. So now, with all of those elements, we understand when all of those come together, they can make a great film. But probably some of us call some of these films great films because of maybe a couple of those components. And so, I mean, we like all of them, but it's one, maybe two, maybe three of those that have to be there. And you're still okay with, like we talked about films, if it gets these three things right, you can overlook some of the bad parts about it. So if we look at story, for example, would you say that story is one of the big three out of these that you would say is important getting you to go to the cinema? And it may not be. It could be direction. It could be something else.
It kind of depends because I got to know if it's a story that I want to see. If it's a story that I want to get into. You've got to sell me on this story. You've got to sell me on this story. Like, do I want to go in for what you're selling me? Because like I said, I have no desire to see Titanic. I still haven't.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Me either.
I mean, I understand the story, and it's not a story for me.
By the way, the
people
win, though, right? The people win against the boat in that one. Is that what
exactly? but I know that. But I know that in and of itself, the way they've shot it is a great film. Because of what James Cameron was able to do with it. There's a lot of great cinematography and things like that. I just don't care about the story.
Oh.
So, like I said, it's not necessarily the story. Is it a story that I want to hear? Mm-hmm. Or if it's not a story that I am expecting to hear, make me care about it. Mm-hmm. So and even so, like I said, I can overlook a story if the visual is strong enough and things like that. Or like I said, or if there is no story, I can still get involved with it if it's done and delivered right. Like I said, Evil Dead 2 has very little coherent story, but everything in it is a great 90-minute ride. It's a 90-minute cartoon.
Okay.
And it's still good.
Okay, so if you were to pick between the elements, just three, what are the three things out of all the elements that have to be there to get you there?
I would say spectacle is one. Characters are two. And direction is three. And I'll say because it needs to be a story that I really want to see. It needs to be a story that I want to see on screen, and it needs to be people that I want to see this story happen to. Because if I don't care about any of those elements, I'm not going to go for your movie.
Right.
I'm just not. No matter how great people say it is, I'm not going to go for it.
Right. Well, what if someone told you that the characters are the story? Then you would care about story a little bit more, right?
Yeah, and the perfect example of that is The Breakfast Club. Nothing happens in that film, but everything happens to those characters. Mm-hmm. It's 8 hours in the school detention. Mm-hmm. That's, simply put, there's nothing in there to say that's interesting. But when you know those characters, because they're characters that you lived and you can understand those tropes, it's a really well told story. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, because I always ask that question because I always find it. I don't think you can separate characters from the story because the stories are characterized by the characters themselves.
Yeah.
So I always find that, but I think that's spot on. You're right, and I think that. See, to your point. See, this is so great. So as we're talking about the importance of story, that's so great because this dispels the notion that your movie has to be super complicated and all this other has to have all these twists and turns in order to be great. In
Right.
fact, the majority of these films that are considered great, I would say that at least 2/3 of them had the most basic story of all times. Like when you look at Kurosawa's story, you look at Raiders of the Lost Ark, you look at even The French Connection, you look at Full Metal Jacket. These weren't movies that said, here's something completely just far left way out there. It is, we're going to talk about the horrors of war, Full Metal Jacket, and what we're going to show the psyche of people, the psychosis of killing and being able to keep killing and then keep going. And then how do you normalize that and then see that as something separate when you come back to civilization? And how can people go into the different levels? I mean, it's just very basic story, but then it goes somewhere because of the characterization. So, yeah, I think a story doesn't have to be super complicated to be great.
no,
It just needs to your point, the characters need to pop so much that you now want to see, well, what do they do? How do they stop this? How do they fix it? What eventually happens to them? Where do they grow? You know?
yeah,
So I think with the story for me, I have to have it. I can't go see a movie where the story, and I'm including the characters in it, if they're not at all engaging, why do I want to watch this? You know,
Right.
why do I want to give up 2 hours out of my day, to watch something that's just the characters aren't compelling, they're not doing anything interesting, they're not facing any struggle, which is part of the reasons why I hated the sequels, because to me, Mary Sue Ray, everything came easy to her. Everything just plopped into her lap, and she just was able to do all these things that other people had to study for many years to do.
The Star Wars sequels.
Yes, the Star Wars sequels. Yes, yeah. So with the Force Awakens and all that, that was one of the biggest turning points for me.
Yeah.
I think people were super excited about having another Star Wars movie. That's why I did so well at first. But then once people got to sit down and digest it, those who know storytelling know, wow, you were entertained, but none of this makes that much sense. And some of these characters in here, why are they here? And why does Poe still live? And who's Lor Santaka? And why does he know Kylo Ren in the beginning and all that stuff? And just, none of that stuff really makes any sense.
Yeah.
And then the fact that Rey can just do all these things that she's never done before, just like that, like mind tricks and lights. You're just kind of like, wow. For me, that's so underwhelmed me.
Yeah.
So I know we're saving this for what makes a movie bad, but in helping me explain what's really good story and what's good characterization, I think that one, by all the misses it had, shows you where it could have hit.
Right.
So when we think about story and characters, okay, that's a big element. Then we talk about the direction. So the importance of the direction. So if we get a director who has these great actors, but then doesn't know how to get the best out of them, or we get a director who has a great screenplay, but does something that completely runs way aghast from what the screenplay was demanding, or you get a director who can't imagine the sound, like what sound should happen as you transition, as you go to scenes, or as part of a theme, that's troubling. So direction is pretty important, huh?
Absolutely. without question. You've got, you've got actors, you've got lights, you've got a scene. Now you've got to have someone in charge telling it where to go, how this is going to unfold, things like that, how we get it on screen, how we get it how we get this message and this story across. You absolutely have to have that controlling factor.
Yeah. And we hear all the time about how actors like to work with certain directors and some don't.
Yep.
Because either the director challenges them to do something that's not very clear, or the director knows them so well they just let them go, right? So I think like Ryan Coogler's this way with Michael B. Jordan. He knows after doing Fruitvale Station, Creed, and Black Panther, he's like, I don't have to overcoach this guy. So that's another piece of the director to be able to when you're looking at Hollywood egos and these actors, and everybody's coming from a different place, and some are making this money on this deal, some are not making as much money. a director has to be able to also not only just handle the visual here of where what he sees, is he also has to be able to handle these actors.
Yeah, and I mean, you get different directors who, like you take Kevin Smith, who is not a strong director, but he's a strong writer. He wants his dialogue delivered in a very, very certain way, and he takes his actors line by line through line readings because he wants his dialogue to stand up front. Like I said, he's not a great director, but he's a great writer. You also have, and it's a matter of directors who can kind of give their actors enough rope and let them do what they do, versus really tight. I mean, like Stanley Kubrick making Shelley Duvall do like 89 takes or something like that to get the exhaustion that it took to get The Shining across. Meanwhile, you have Scorsese, who will just let Jack Nicholson go in The Departed.
Yeah.
Just kind of letting them have all that motion, things like that. So it takes a matter of how much rope do you give them, and what do you get out of them in that performance.
Yeah, no, it's super important, and the director, just sometimes them being able to know, like, I like that some directors will recognize, like I like Ridley Scott, for example, when he was doing Alien. Now, most people did not want to even touch that film. They thought, this is going to be stupid. This is a monster film. And so all these different directors didn't want to touch it at all. And he finally had a chance after doing The Duelist, and it did so, but he was ready for something like big budget that was going to get there. And so when he read the script, he loved it, but he saw a lot of Dune influences in it. And so I love the fact that he said, no, I'm not going to just copy Dune and just put this out there and make my stamp on, sci-fi horror films. I'm going to take things that would make sense and show the humanized portion of like Sigourney Weaver's character.
Yeah.
And then the other guys on the Nostramos, right? That this is how a team would act, even though they're not specialists at this particular thing that they're looking at now.
Yeah, and help me on this, because I might be getting this story wrong, but when you see that scene where there's, after they've done the planet and they're sitting around and they're eating lunch or whatever and things like that, you have that moment where John Hurt, he finally starts feeling his belly convulse and he flips onto the table and things like that. Did they set that up to where that was just kind of the one take where they didn't know that was going to happen? Like the actors on set didn't know that was going to happen. The only one
there were a couple
was John Hurt.
Yeah, I think there were at least a couple of scenes where they did that. That's true.
So the reaction that they're getting is a genuine reaction to what's happening to that actor in the moment.
Yes, I think that is true. If I remember correctly, I think that is true.
So again, that's a great example of a director knowing the rope and the strings and things like that to get that reaction out of their cast.
Yes, and I would give this piece to it as well, as talking about Ridley Scott. That was one of the first female heroines in film that lasted as long, and even the black actor, the guy that was also there, those were the two who lasted the longest. All the other, and so it's an understanding of where you are in the world, also as a director, but not pandering to it. Like Kathleen Kennedy and all of them did when they just decided to make, Ray just God-powered and all this other stuff and everything. It's kind of like, you got to understand what's going on in the world around you as you're building this film, because it will probably play into some sort of a theme. But I love the fact that the way Ridley Scott does it is he doesn't beat you over the head and make he doesn't make Ridley just great at everything. He doesn't. She's a mom. She's a regular everyday person who finds herself in a ridiculous situation, and she's also the only female on the ship as well. So there's a lot of things that we would see from her perspective, how she would attack this particular alien, which makes it interesting, makes it new. Whereas today you see some of these directors, they're force feeding stuff onto you because there's a quota of this and a quota of that, and we're trying to be ahead of the zeitgeist by saying this is the way things are going to go, when all you have to do is watch the movie 10 years from now, and you'll know if you hit the right chords. Because if you hit the right chords, people are going to go back and go, wow, like Ridley Scott, they go, wow, that was awesome that he stepped forward at a time and did what he did and wasn't afraid of it. And he did it with other movies too, like Thelma and Louise, whatever. But when you go back and you watch the sequels after this, people are going to go, oh my God, the pandering was ridiculous. The homaging was so ridiculous, right? Yeah. It's when people stop and get over the love fest, they'll be able to see a director has to have the kind of foresight to know, hey, by making this one conscious decision,
Yeah.
to tying with what's going on today, am I going to exacerbate it, or am I going to lay it just in there, just so gently, where I don't beat you over the head with it?
Yeah. Am I delivering this? Am I delivering the story? Am I delivering what needs to be seen on film? What you as the viewer, what you as the audience need to see?
Yeah.
Are you getting, and then are they getting it effectively? That's, the director has to be an effective communicator in all aspects, and for some, I think, is a challenge. For others, you know, it comes very easy. It comes very easy.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, there is a way to take modern themes and put them in the film because they have to be universal. But there's a part where if you go overboard, you now have the opposite effect of what you really wanted.
Yeah.
And so, speaking of that, that does bring us up to looking at themes in a movie, because that is also one of those pieces that can show up in either the writing or it can show up in the way you visualize it. But themes are very important. And you said if it's not something that you'd be interested in seeing, right? Maybe the theme is not going to really carry you.
Yep.
You're not going to go see the film. So tell me about your thoughts on themes.
Themes, and again, it's really, we've had the conversation offline, so I think I kind of struggle with this.
Sure.
I think it's the universality of the story, if that's even a word. The universal, basically, understanding of what's happening to character, what's happening to world, what's happening
Agreed.
to, etc. It's basically, the themes are, is it something that you can connect with? Is it something that you care about? And is it something that you can listen to a story about for 2 hours? You know, whether that's love or drama or horror or crime or what can this say? What will this say to you? And is it being delivered? And is it being delivered effectively?
Yes.
Because, like I said, there are things where there may be certain actors. There are certain actors. See, we'll get into that. But like I said, I'm not a love story guy all the time.
Right.
But like I said, sometimes it can be really well done. Like when Harry Met Sally, I think it's I think it's a fun love story. Yeah. There may, or like I said, it may be themes that I don't understand. Like I said, I don't understand because I wasn't there. Civil rights and racial conflicts in the '60s, but I could watch something like Malcolm X and be drawn into that story. Mm-hmm. I can be drawn into those themes. I can understand, the rise of this powerful figure and his impact on the world, and him going from a brutal setting in prison to being free to do the walk to Mecca. There are things that I may not understand, but if you as a director can help me understand them and let me understand them and let me kind of empathize and understand, then you've got me, and then you've got my story and my interest.
Yeah, yeah. See, and that's what I love too, because there's certain things I don't care about, and I won't go see them. So if you just want to do a movie on NASCAR, I'm not interested in that. But if the theme is, here's how an everyday guy who didn't have the money to even buy his first car to race, who barely could make, the team, and then you show me the things that would be universal, like struggle. Struggle is universal. Everybody struggles. Everybody suffers on some level, right? And so if you can show me that and not make it so much just about NASCAR itself, which I don't care about, then I'm going to pay attention. And the closest thing I can get to with that, and it's not NASCAR, it's actually more interesting, it's the Le Mans race in the Ford versus Ferrari. Yeah. That was fantastic to see how here's this guy, this Miles, who's this great, he's this great racer. And then you have this guy who's trying to reinvent himself in Carroll Shelby, because this was a guy who was a chicken farmer at one point, but because of his, because of some heart palpitations, he can't race cars anymore. So what are you going to do? And his chicken farm got totally taken out. So how are you going to make money? And this is the guy who now makes all these special bolt-in parts to cars and is known for the Shelby Cobra and the Shelby version of the Mustang and all that stuff. So I love seeing the reinvention and the recreation of people, because your story does change. It doesn't stay the same. So while people might think, oh, the Le Mans race, well, who watches that endurance race? Who cares about that? It doesn't even happen here in America. the story, the theme of you have to reinvent yourself. And you can do it one way, which is hating everybody like Miles was doing, or you could do it the way Carroll Shelby was doing it, with just taking things in stride and just making stuff work. And then he meets Miles and helps Miles get to where he needs to go. And then together, those two were a fantastic team to help Ford beat Ferrari, right? So if you don't like cars, you can watch Ford versus Ferrari and be like, oh my God, that's fantastic, because the theme, we all understand it. Coming from the bottom, now we're here from the song, right? Yeah. We can all get that. And then it's portrayed that it's not just trying to show you all the racing scenes so much as it's showing you what's at stake for each guy if they lose, what's at stake if they win, and then watching them choose which one to go for, and then watching them pair up. I mean, it's just so yeah. For me, if the theme is really good, then I like it. Like with Dark Knight, right? I like the theme that, you either die a hero or live long enough to become the villain, because we've seen that happen. This guy was cool at one point. Star Wars movies was cool at one point, and now all of a sudden, it's a villain that comes in and takes over. And now Star Wars isn't remembered as what it once was, unless you just look at the originals, right? So stuff like that. That theme hit me really hard watching a movie about a guy in a cape walking around beating people up at night.
Yep.
So, any other thoughts about just a great film before we slide into some of our recos?
I think it's a matter of what do you enjoy?
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, no person in their right mind wants to see 5 kids in the van get attacked by a crazy Texas hillbilly family. But when you see the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and you see the brutality of this film, and you see this woman running for her life from this crazy family, it's insane to watch. And while you hopefully to God you never have to experience that, but you're put in those shoes and you're given that empathy, and you're given that empathy for this character who is literally running for her life. And I mean, you hear that maniac in the background, you see that glass cracking, you feel those footsteps behind you, you feel that hot Texas sun going in the night, and you're all alone, things like that. No one in their right mind would want to see that, but wow, is it really something to see? I think it really is a matter of taste.
Yeah.
Are you open? When it comes to a great film, is it something that you not only see and hear, but is it also something that you can experience? When it comes to great film, did you experience it?
Mm-hmm.
Because you like My Man Can't Jump. You know, you can hear Jimmy, but you ain't listening to Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
Are you experiencing the movie? Are you drawn in? Are you taking in? No matter whether it's 5 kids on a day of detention, or a gladiator in the middle of the arena asking, "Are you not entertained?" The thousands of masses who just wanted to see this guy get killed.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what, did it draw you in? Mm-hmm. Did the director bring you in? Did the acting bring you in? Did the story bring you in? Mm-hmm. Did it bring you in? That's what makes a great film, is that did it bring you in? Did it surround you for 2 hours and help you escape into this world?
Yes.
Or if it's a documentary, did it effectively tell you the story of this person, these events, things like that? Did it draw you in? Mm-hmm. That's what makes a great film, is that did it draw you in?
Yeah, I love it. And that is how I judge these films now. That's why, my Marvel fatigue, as we talked about last show, is because these movies, when I already know and I can see the plot coming from a mile away, and these people are just laughing at everything, they dissolve the tension, how can that draw me in if I'm watching video game like CGI and it's just about my own personal self being represented in the movie? Because I would say that's also the other thing. I don't go to the movie to watch a movie about me. I want to watch a movie that's got something different going on, something that maybe I haven't seen, I haven't experienced. and then seeing how that person dealt with it, right? So
Right. Or if you have experienced it, can you empathize with that situation?
yes, because like I think some of the filmmaking is it's almost too narcissistic in a way. Like it's trying to give everybody that thing that they think, well, every narcissist will love this, and so that's the case. And it's like, no, I don't need to see me in the movie. You don't have to worry about trying to represent my race, my gender, my whatever in the movie. I don't need all that. Just make a great story, and then with that great story, tell me, all right, who's the protagonist, and are they the antagonist themselves? Because it doesn't always have to be something else or something else or someone else. It could be them themselves, right? So help me understand who this person is, and then let me see what's it like to walk in their shoes. And then once I understand what it's like to walk in their shoes, then it's like, okay, so how do they win? How does someone with all these dire conflicts and obstacles in their way, how do they win? That's what we watch for. That's why we watch a lot of the sports we watch. How will this team come back? You know, what will they do to get ahead? So there's that drama, that ongoing drama of life. And so if you can't capture that and make it representative, because it doesn't have to follow everything that happens here, but if it's at least representative of some basic key needs that we all have, then what am I watching? And I don't spend 2 hours to watch just something that doesn't connect. You know, it's got to connect with me. So I'm with you. So when I walk out of the theater, I should be feeling pretty great about what I've seen, or I'm pensive. I'm still processing it. I'm still trying to think, did I like that? Did I not like that? That's not a bad film necessarily either. It's just making me think a little bit more than usual. But I would say that. I would say that I think if the trend will be, the greatest movies aren't going to be the most complicated ones. They're going to be the ones that you can sync up with and say, yeah, I felt that.
Yeah. There are only so many elements in the story. Did you tell me the story? Did you tell me the story effectively?
Yeah.
Did you give me something that I needed?
Yeah. Yeah. And as crazy as it is, I'll end it with this one, and then we'll go to our what we've seen.
Yeah.
Is when I think of even Zack Snyder, who's not necessarily one of my favorites, but is definitely the favorite of a film samurai, even in 300. I was feeling for King Leonidas when he looked over the shore and he saw all those ships of Persians. And I was thinking to myself, come on, this is going to be crazy. Just 300 of y'all against all of them. And then just the narration in that, where he talks about him getting up he looks like he's bowing, but he's really getting ready to stand up, grab that spear and throw it at Xerxes, because he wants to prove that even a god king can bleed.
Yep.
And he just misses the mark. And that right there was showing you, hey, here's how they're going to go down. It wasn't from not having a valiant effort. It's they're just a bit outmanned. And so seeing Leonidas go down, and before he goes down, he looks at Ephialtes and he says, I hope you live a long life. But he wasn't meaning that in the positive way. Mm-hmm. He was meaning that you didn't die a battle on earth that you fought for. Yeah. You turned us in. So I hope you live with that torment forever. So just that with Leonidas, and that last shot of him laying there amongst all of his men dead with arrows all through all of them, and himself too, just dead. You were just like, wow. See, now that wasn't super, but it told the story and made you feel over Leonidas and the 300. The Battle of Thermopylae.
There you go.
So what would you then recommend? Now, we've talked all about these great elements of great movies. We've talked about great scenes. We've mentioned some great movies, directors, actors, all of that. So what would you say is a good reco worth watching for the fans now that we're talking about the greatness?
All right. So yesterday, Saturday 9/3 was National Cinema Day. And so I took advantage of the $3 movie prices that were all around theaters. And what the one that I chose to go see was George Miller's latest offering, 3,000 Years of Longing. This is a very simple fairy tale told beautifully on film. George Miller, the director of the Mad Max films, The Witches of Eastwick, a couple of the Happy Feet movies. This is a story of a woman who comes into possession of a lamp with a djinn in it, who can basically give her 3 wishes. The issue is that she doesn't want anything. She's a narratologist, knows stories about stories, and knows that every story about wishing is a cautionary tale. And so he tells her, and so Idris Elba tells Tilda Swinton, who plays an neurologist, his tale, his story of how he wound up in the lamp and his years and years of servitude as the Jinn, and it unfolds into this tragic, comic, beautiful love story. And this is a movie that really needs to be seen on screen and on a big screen to truly appreciate everything that goes into it, because it is so much film. Kind of like Everything Everywhere All at Once. There's so much happening on screen. The visualization, the costuming, the visual effects, the performances, just all of it on screen is beautiful and gorgeous and just really draws your eye in. And when it's a very, very simple very simple love story, and just basically what would you most wish for, what would you most want, and of course that thing in this movie is love. It's a really, really simple story told beautifully, and again, I cannot get over the direction of this film. And again, it is a film that really, really needs to be seen on a big screen to be appreciated because of the film that it is.
Okay. Yeah, I hadn't gone out to the theater, I hadn't seen anything or saw anything that I really wanted to see, so I had to do a rewatch. And so this one, since we were talking about great films, potential masterpieces today, this one is, I would say, is the unsung or forgotten masterpiece. This is a movie called The Grey, which came out in 2011. It was rated R. It was just under 2 hours. It was directed by Joe Carnahan, and it's starring Liam Neeson and Frank Grillo, who y'all remember from Marvel's Crossbones. And everybody knows Liam Neeson, right? So he was in at least 3 Taken films, and one of them was good. And so this is a film that's incredible. The reason why it's a masterpiece is it looks at suffering, and it looks at depression, and it asks those quintessential questions like, why? Why is this? Why has this happened to me? And so you have this great film about Liam Neeson. He's a guy who protects people who work in Alaska when they're putting up the lines and all this stuff from animals, especially coyotes, wolves, this sort of thing, and any other danger that could possibly happen. And he's looking at his life, and this film is talking about, live a life worth living for, not a life worth dying for. Like, it's a difference, it's a switch. So it's very smart. So it has a lot of Viktor Frankl isms in it in terms of the meaning of life and meaning of suffering. And it has one of the best plane crashes scenes ever in it, where the way it's shot, the cinematography is perfect, and the sound, everything goes well, and it's incredible. And so what you get is this guy, his name is John, it's Liam Neeson. That's what he is. He's depressed. Look at his job. His job is to keep wolves off of the guys when they're working in these certain areas while they're trying to do their job and put the lines up and all this stuff. And they're in a plane crash. And so it opens up that whole thing of, oh, wow, why are we alive and why some people are dead? And there's just a scene in there, several scenes, but a scene where there's a guy, because imagine he's asleep, he's knocked out from the crash, and he wakes up and he doesn't know who's alive and who's dead yet. So he's looking at stuff strewn all over the place, half bodies, whatever. And he finally runs into some people that are alive, but this one guy is going to die because he's bleeding out. And it was one of the most touching scenes ever from a guy who's supposed to be super depressed, and he is, but he's so empathizing with this guy. And he's just telling him, hey, listen, death is coming. It's going to come smoothly all at once. Don't fight it. He's basically letting him know as he's bleeding out that, hey, I'm trying to be that voice that talks to you. I'm not going to try to tell you, you'll be fine as soon as we get the prayer. He's not doing any of that at all. He's just talking this guy into that end, and it's just fantastic. And so this film has so many moves about it where we've said it before when we felt frustrated, when we felt overly antagonized by things. And so this film didn't get the views that it needed to get because they thought it was going to be more of a super action film, and it has to have the action. It's intense when they do the action. It's just that there's a lot of this great philosophical stuff in these men that you would see because they're in the middle of nowhere. They don't know where they are, and so much fresh snow. How do we even know which way is north, south, east, or west at this point, other than looking up at the sky if you can see it? And then we've got these wolves. Their den is somewhere nearby, and they're just trying to figure out how do we get back as we got people who are damaged from a plane flight. What do you do, and how do you do it? Right? So this is one of those great films. I'll tell anybody, if you sit down, If you're tired of the Marvel jokes, put this in, sit down. This is a survival film that's super intelligent. It allows you to ask questions, and it doesn't feed you answers anywhere, but it does pose the questions for you. And then you watch it through these men to see how each one handles being the last few people that survived from a plane of 23 down to the number that it is. Crazy good.
There you go. All right, let's shout out and get out of here.
It's time to get out of here. All right, well, shout outs. So how about you, Kazak? Who are we shouting out?
Just again, shouting out all our family here at not DeepElementAir.com. That was in the last incarnation. On DallasOnAir.com. We do want to go ahead and shout out, of course, the shows on our sister Sundays. That is, of course, My Show with Cole Houston, the Rancor Pit Live, and Isle of Toys. We should be bringing both of those to you this month. We've always got great stuff planned. And, of course, check out everything here on DallasOnAir.com. As always, we do want to thank Jansen and Kat for giving us a home here every Sunday. But check out the great stuff that we've got. Check out Say Something. Check out Face to Face. Check out Project Hustle 365. Check out all the great stuff that we've got. There's something good for you right here in DallasOnAir.com.
Yes, sir. And my shout outs will go out to the film samurai himself, one of the original OGs here, Stephanie Crane, Cole Houston, Eddie Medina. I'm trying to talk faster than I really want to. Freddie Daniel Meza, who had his birthday yesterday. Happy birthday, buddy. Was glad to be out there to drive out and see you. Harry Thomas and Prim, who are both YouTubers who also do a film channel, and Troy Ross, Lauren Wiedauer, Tristan Fraser, Sean Presley, and Brandy and Barry Austin. So those are my shout outs. And so next show, we talked about what was great. Next show, we're going to tell you what made some movies kind of bad or basically ignorable, something that you just don't even need to worry about spending your time seeing. But that will be next show. So we'll see you then. Until then, I'm the Vega Bomber, and he's Kazak, and we're out.
Deuces, sayonara.